Welcome everyone, to those that have joined us before, those that haven't. My name is Alexa Zana and I'm the host of the Making Leadership Mindful webinar series. I'm really excited in August this month to be bringing a 3-part series, and this session is actually the second of 3. So we hosted one last week that was based on resilience in workplaces, so please do check that out if you missed it. And then today I'm very excited to have with me 2 of our expert guests in Linda Ray and Jeff McEwen from Neurocapability. And today's session, we're going to be looking at how we build psychological safety in our workplaces. And Linda is really going to break that down for us and help us understand, first and foremost, what psychological safety is. What is this concept that we keep hearing so much of right now in business, and how we actually can start doing something about this to really start bringing about true change and real psychological safety in our workplaces. So thank you again for joining us. As we're going through this session, any questions you may have, please pop them into the chat. I'm going to be moderating this chat constantly to allow Linda to keep presenting. And what I will do, I will just jump into the conversation as we go with any of your questions coming through on that chat that are relevant to what we're speaking about. And then at the end of the session, we're going to have a bit more of an open and informal discussion with Linda where we can ask her some more of those questions and reflect on any of those things that weren't answered through the session. So welcome all again. I do ask that you please do keep your microphones off through this session, just so that we can keep the flow going. And again, pop any burning questions you have into that chat. Both myself and Jeff are going to keep an eye on that, and we will be sort of moderating those questions and asking them on your behalf to keep the session flowing. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Linda Ray, who is the director at Neurocapability, and she's going to do a bit more of an introduction on herself and start our fantastic session on psychological safety. So welcome, Linda, and I'll hand over to you.
Pleasure to be here. It sounds like a frog in my throat. Welcome to everyone from Australia and around the globe. It's great to see the interest in this topic. My name, as Alexa said, is Linda Ray. And probably in 2006, I stumbled across neuroscience by complete accident, and it changed the way I thought about leadership, about how we do organisational change, a whole bunch of stuff, even how I parented. And I kind of carried my brain around in my head for about 40 years without paying it any attention. So it was nice to get more familiar with my brain and how it was driving my behaviour. So I'm also co-founder of another company called Conductor Software, which is a company that administers a psychological safety team-based assessment and links it with performance. And I'm just also establishing co-founding with Professor Justin Kennedy, an Institute of Organisational Neuroscience, where we'll be looking at really trying to ramp up research in this area of psychological safety. Jeff, did you want to just quickly introduce yourself, because I know you're going to kind of jump in at a couple of places in the webinar?
Yeah, I'm just a guy who quit his job to follow what Linda's dream and vision is about. My mission was a bit bigger than that. I'm here to plant trees under whose shade I'll never sit. And then I did Linda's advanced diploma of neuroscience of leadership, and then she rang me and said, "Do you want to come and work for me?" So that has been the greatest part of my career at 51 years of age. And I'll talk more.
Yeah, it'd be lovely to have Jeff on board. So Jeff's mission is to, he's just described to you, mine is to change the world one brain at a time. And that's what I'm trying to do, and build a whole bunch of people that will amplify the impact that we're having to ensure that every person thrives and flourishes at work. So I'm just going to share some ideas with you, and as Alexa said, it would be great if you pop your questions or even insights or comments in the chat pane. That would be wonderful, and I'd love to make this conversational if we could. So I'm just going to share my screen. Can everyone see my screen? All good?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I think all of us would probably agree that maybe this idea of am I safe is pretty top of mind for everyone. Many of us are in lockdown, not so much, well, we're not in Brisbane, but that changes kind of week by week. But many other people in parts of Australia and around the world are experiencing lockdown, which is a measure designed to keep us physically safe. And but the interesting thing about this is it's creating a lot of uncertainty for people, and this is impacting on our well-being and on our performance. And I think a number of people would probably describe that they're a little bit lockdown weary. And so we're in a constant state of kind of arousal. The brain doesn't really like uncertainty. So we're constantly, trying to predict what's going to happen next. So the brain is often kind of referred to as a prediction organ as well. And so this constant state of arousal is really impacting on well-being. It's impacting on our mental health and our performance, and also our sense of connection. Because one of the things that I've noticed since COVID hit is I live alone, and I have a couple of wonderful adult children, and whilst I'm seeing them, my daughter works in high-risk area, and she won't hug me because she's scared that she might pass on COVID to me. So I think a lot of us are oxytocin deprived. We're not getting those hugs, we're not connecting with people, we can't shake hands. So it's a completely different environment, and it's really hard to predict what's going to happen into the future. So we've got this sense of am I physically safe? But I think there's also real concerns about people's psychological safety. And I guess that's why we've seen this really kind of rise in interest of psychological safety. And it's not really a new concept. We've seen Professor Amy Edmondson first talking about it probably through her research in about 1999. We saw Google do Project Aristotle, where they identified psychological safety as one of the most important of 5 key ingredients in high-performing teams. But interestingly, we've known for decades that psychological safety influences a whole range of things in the workplace. It influences our engagement, our performance, our well-being, our mental health. It also influences our capacity to be innovative. So we know that when we don't feel psychologically safe, it's hard to think outside the box. So I think we can probably say that the pandemic has escalated interest in this concept, but it's not just the pandemic. We've had these projects that I've just referred to, but we've also got ISO 45003, which is the Occupational Health and Safety Management, Psychological Health and Safety at Work, and it's the first globally agreed standard for psychological injury prevention. We've also seen royal commissions in Australia where they've, the mental health one in Victoria, where we've identified psych safety as a really important component that we need to be paying more attention to. There's another really good article by Shane Snow that Alexis referred to when she was talking about this, how psychological safety actually works. And he too would suggest that in the current environment, it's needed now more than ever. And I guess I first started being interested in psychological safety a number of years ago. And when I first started using that term, people were a bit scared. And in fact, I can remember some HR people saying, well, we don't want to measure it because what if it's bad? Then we might have to do something about it. So people were really concerned about, what is this psychological safety thing? And so I think, we're seeing more interest in it. And I think there's still, fair to say, there's still some nervousness about the term, but we are seeing a little bit more interest. And I think it's interesting when you look at concepts that are introduced, and there's a kind of the early adopters, and as a serial entrepreneur and someone that's has a bit of a good dose of bright shiny object syndrome, I've always liked to be at the beginning of things. And so I'm very much an early adopter, and I was an early adopter in applications of neuroscience to leadership, but again, an early adopter of seeing the potential that understanding psychological safety and measuring it could make such a massive difference for people in the workplace. But I think there's a big chasm between, as you can see, this slide, so this theory by Geoffrey Moore, there's this big chasm that has to be crossed before it becomes just part of what we do. So I think we're in early stages of adoption of thinking about psychological safety, and then the critical question, how do we build it? How do we improve this? How do we influence it? And so I think that we're still in an early days of this. And I know even after the webinar that I did yesterday, that some people went back and started talking about this in their workplace, and they were met with, well, that's not my problem. You know, you need to sort yourself out. So it's interesting. There's, you know, little pockets that are really starting to adopt this. There's also quite a bit of pushback still and resistance to this. So it's going to be a while, I think, before we see it. It might be another 10, 20 years, similar to the physical safety. How long is it going to take before it just becomes something that is accepted, that we need to pay attention to in the workplace? Jeff, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, because I know this is you're a big fan of this model.
Well, that's the thing that we work on is early adopters are change makers. So you have to be the catalyst for change in anything. It doesn't matter whether that's in your family, in society, in business. So if you're that catalyst for change, you're going to create resistance. People aren't going to understand what you're talking about. And we started using the term pace of awareness. So when you're in this early stage of something, some people are really onto it because they're early adopters. Some people are way at the other end where there's skeptics. You know, they will only ever change because the rest of society changed. Our role is not to focus on the skeptics, because that takes too much effort. We want to work with the early adopters and the early majority, and that creates the trend that everyone else follows. And that goes back into the book by Malcolm Gladwell, Outliers. There's always people who are forcing change and being the change for good. I mean, and sadly for bad, but let's not focus on that. But yeah. And that's the work of what we're doing now, is trying to get to the early majority to bring people on board with a change we all know instinctively at a human level. When someone in business says it's only business, it's not personal, that's wrong. We're human beings. It's very personal. And we actually have that around the wrong way. And that's what we're trying to change.
Thanks, Jeff. That's a beautiful description of that. And I think what Jeff is kind of also alluding to is we need to be more human-centric in how we think about work. You know, we deal with humans. We pay people to think, and we need to be looking at how can we support people to be the best they can at work. So I'm guessing you've, a lot of you are already pretty familiar with the concept psychological safety. As I said before, it's not a new concept. It was first introduced in 1965, so you know, decades ago by Shine and Bennis. It was also something that Kahn spoke about in 1990. And, you know, really there is now decades of research showing that psychological safety impacts, you know, the process of learning, and so our capacity to learn. It impacts our change appetite. So if we have low psychological safety, we have low change appetite, which then has big implications for change and transformation processes. And we know it also impacts on engagement. If we don't feel psychologically safe, then we're less likely to engage in discretionary effort and, you know, go that extra mile. So I guess Amy Edmondson, she talks about it as a belief that you won't be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. So it's really where there are high levels of trust and where people feel like they can speak up and speak out. And even though it might take courage to do that, that you won't be punished for speaking up and speaking out. And she saw this through a lot of her interesting work in the health sector, where she was looking at medication error reporting, and her hunch was that in teams with high psychological safety, the error reporting would be low, but in fact it was the opposite. And that's what got her thinking about this whole concept of psychological safety, because really when people feel psychologically safe in a hospital environment, they're they're okay with speaking up and speaking out and going, hey, I'm not sure that's the correct medication dose here. And so to be able to identify that, because they felt safe, that they weren't going to be punished for doing so. I want to really point out that psychological safety, I think one of the perceptions floating around the place, it's about, being nice to one another and singing Kumbaya and, hanging out together and not challenging people, but that's not what it is. And I think Amy Edmondson also speaks a lot about this. It's psychological safety is where people feel safe, but also you feel safe to hold each other to account. So it goes hand in hand with accountability. If you've just got psychological safety, but you're not holding people to account, then that's actually not supporting performance. And it's not really what we would describe as a positive psychological safety environment. And I think that there are some in the skeptics kind of box that we referred to on that earlier slide that have this perception that it is just about being nice, and it's not just about being nice. It's actually about really supporting people to be brave, to be vulnerable, to be courageous in how they engage with other people. I want to just, I'm sure some of you are familiar with Dan Pink, and in 2009, I remember when I saw his TED talk on the puzzle of motivation, and I was really struck by his comment that there's a kind of a mismatch that exists between what science shows and what business does. And he talked about it in the context of motivation, and how despite decades of science around what truly motivates people, we were still using very outdated carrot and stick approaches that didn't work. And so I was really, I got really excited when I saw this. I thought, oh, great, people are going to start catching up to this idea that there's all this amazing research and that business needs to catch up with what we're finding out. Well, it hasn't happened as fast as I would have liked it. And I would kind of propose that there's still a massive gap between what science shows and what business does, and also what leaders do. So I want to kind of just delve a little bit into what some of the science shows that's kind of, I think, really relevant to psychological safety. And one of the things we know that what science shows, so if we look at some of the research coming from social neuroscience and affective psychology, we know that our performance and well-being and our psychological safety is profoundly impacted by the answer to one simple question. And that question is, am I safe or am I not safe? And we look at this in terms of our physical safety, but we also look at it in terms of what I'm going to talk about in a moment, social and psychological safety. My colleague, Professor Justin Kennedy, and I, we've been exploring the applications of social neuroscience and affective psychology to look at how can we use what we're learning from those from that evidence base, and really then think about it in terms of how does that help us better understand what drives behaviour in the workplace, and also what makes us feel safe or not safe. And we've been developing a model that we call SNAP, because it's social neuroscience, affective psychology. And I want to talk a little bit for a moment around, share this model with you that's emerged from our thinking, which really shows how we're our brain is trying to keep us safe. So if you look at this slide, you can see the model. So up the top, we've got social safety. Now, social safety is something that we assess at an unconscious level. So it happens outside of conscious awareness. So think about the last time you met with your team. It could be face-to-face or it could be online. As soon as you enter a social context and interact with other people, you're taking in information to fundamentally answer that question, am I safe or not safe in this social situation or this social context? So you're taking information in through your senses, you notice what people are doing, you listen to, tone of voice and what's going on from people speaking with each other or not speaking with each other. You notice how you're greeted, are you greeted warmly or are you not greeted at all? So you're making sense of all of this, and your brain is deciding in that moment based on this, am I safe, not safe, what you should pay attention to. Like, oh, have a little bit more of a look at that. That person looks really grumpy and they don't look happy at all. I wonder what's going on there. And if your brain starts to say, oh, I'm not sure I'm safe in this situation, it starts to activate a whole neurophysiological response to that. And that's what we talk about, you know, in this moment, we're doing a snap judgment. And if the answer is I'm not safe, then it activates the snap reflex. And that snap reflex means that we would see, you know, a whole bunch of neurophysiological action in terms of the release of cortisol, you know, adrenaline, norepinephrine, decrease in serotonin. So we start to see this whole, our bodies get ready for that fight, flight, flee response, because our brain doesn't really distinguish, or it distinguishes in the same way a physical threat and a social threat. So we have the same reaction to physical and social threats. And then our brain decides what we should do. Okay, I don't feel safe here, so I'm not going to take any risks. I'm going to be, you know, really shut down. So, and it's at that point, once your brain has made that unconscious assessment, that we can say whether we feel safe or don't feel safe. And that's our felt experience of psychological safety. So I'm hoping that's making sense. I don't know, Alexis, if there's any questions or comments that you want to refer to at this point, or whether I should press on.
There's a few really lovely comments coming through, Linda, but I also just had a question, I guess, for myself here, and that is, you know, talking about this concept of social safety and the implications in the workplace and how that kind of shuts down idea and risk taking in the workplace. But I wonder if you can just touch on for a second what maybe some of the longer term well-being effects of that might be, because we know, you know, cortisol, adrenaline, this fight or flight response, when we stay stuck in that. So if we're in that stress response at work every day in a unsafe psychological environment, how might that also then affect some of the mental health and the well-being components that we're trying to address as well?
It has a profound effect on it. In fact, when we see that people are under prolonged periods of stress, so we would be feeling not socially safe or not psychologically safe, and there's prolonged release of cortisol, we actually start to see changes to the brain. So we start to see you know, enlarged amygdala, so that part of the brain that's looking for, you know, differences in our environment and threat. We start to see hippocampus, which is what helps us to encode and learn new things and lay down new memories, is compromised. So we also notice that, and I've seen this in speaking with people, is people are saying, I'm really struggling to make decisions. So it impacts our capacity to make decisions. I'm struggling to remember things. I keep losing my keys. So it has a profound impact on us. And I guess this is where we need to look at, there's a couple of components in thinking about well-being. There's what can we personally and individually do to positively impact on our well-being, but there's also the workplace environment. How is the workplace environment potentially negatively impacting on our mental health and our well-being? And I think one of the things that we need to be really thinking about in terms of mental health is there will always be a proportion of people that have mental health issues that work in our organisations. But our job as leaders and employers is to do no more harm, because we know that when people have an existing mental health challenge and then they are not feeling psychologically or socially safe at work, it will exacerbate it. And that's when we start to see escalating psychological injury claims. So yeah, so profound impacts on our brain and our body. And that's the interesting thing right now, is that we're, you know, all of us probably are experiencing this time as, you know, impacting differently on us. So some of you that are at home, I saw something on, I can't remember if it was LinkedIn or the news or something, about a woman that has to hide in her cupboard to do meetings because of she's juggling, you know, a partner working at home with her and her kids. So, you know, there's lots of stress and pressure, and we really need to be thinking about what are we doing to look after ourselves, because there's some influence we have over that. But also, I guess the whole point of thinking about psychological safety is we need to be really influencing everybody's mental health and well-being at work.
Yeah, wow. So I guess addressing this concept of psychological safety from like a team environment standpoint also then directly addresses some of those well-being concerns as well then.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing, I'm going to talk in a moment about the impact that leaders have on psychological safety, but I think team members do as well. So we can all play a part in influencing social safety. And, you know, that's just even how you greet people, how you check in with them, how you make sure people are okay. So there's a part we can all play in that. And I think I'll talk a little bit about that at the end as well.
Fantastic. And I just have one more question here, Linda, before we keep moving on, and that is from Mace. And she's just asked us if, Linda, can you please explain the unconscious, conscious, and the interpersonal and the intrapersonal part of this diagram for us, please?
Sure. Okay. So in unconscious, so this is at the unconscious level where we're making this snap judgment. This is happening largely outside of conscious awareness, because we take in around 11 million bits of information per second. If we were aware of 11 million bits of information per second, we'd go into meltdown. So we only kind of start to pay attention to about 40 pieces of information per second. So this happens outside of conscious awareness, and this is where emotions are constructed. So if you're interested in the, you know, the more might need someone to go on mute. If you're interested in the stuff around emotion theory, Lisa Feldman Barrett does some really great work on this, but really it's what's constructed in that moment. So in that moment when we're making a snap judgment, we're tapping into past memory, what's called episodic memory. So we're asking ourselves that question, what happened when I was in a similar situation? So we look at past experience, we look at information coming in through our senses, and how we're kind of our affect, how that's making us feel. So that happens largely outside of conscious awareness, and that's where emotions are constructed. And emotions are not the same as feelings. Feelings follow on from emotions. So you have this emotional experience, and then it becomes you're able to articulate and be able to talk about, I feel safe or I don't feel safe, and I feel safe because of X, Y, Z, or I don't feel safe because of, you know, whatever. And you can actually then start to name feelings that are associated with that. Like I feel angry, I feel frustrated, I feel ignored, I feel belittled, I feel humiliated. So those all follow on from our assessment of our social safety. And so that's really that interpersonal, you know, what's happening in terms of interactions with other people. And then the intrapersonal is our felt experience, our personal experience of that. So social safety is almost like the precursor to being able to talk about our you know, how we're feeling in that moment. So hopefully that helps explain that. All right, I might keep pressing on if that's okay, Alexis. You still with me, Alexis?
Yeah, please keep going, Linda. Yep, absolutely.
Okay. So when we make that judgment, I don't feel safe or I feel safe, it then influences performance. And I think that's what people are starting to better understand through the whole concept of psychological safety. So when we don't feel safe, when we've made a snap judgment that it's not a socially safe situation, and then we've determined I don't feel safe, what happens is the snap reflex kicks in, and our attention focuses on staying safe. And this is about staying socially safe. And so I'm not going to put myself out there. I'm going to hunker down. I'm going to stay right under the radar. I'm not going to take any risks here because you know, if I make a mistake, I might be punished or humiliated. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep quiet. I'm not going to speak up, you know, because that's too risky. I'm going to go through the motions because I really am not feeling great here, and I just do what I absolutely have to do. And please don't make me do any changes because my brain's really just trying to stay focused on keeping me safe. And so take it. And the brain is an energy conserving organ, so I don't want to take on anything else. And, you know, I'm feeling really stressed. So obviously this is a continuum from people that feel really unsafe through to people that feel incredibly safe. And so when we feel safe and when we're able to feel psychologically safe in our team and in that social environment we work within, our attention actually moves out beyond team and to organisation. And we know that people feel much more confident to have courageous conversations, to, even if they know what they might be proposing may not be popular, they're willing to take that risk to speak up and speak out. They'll try new things because they know that if they make a mistake, they're not going to be punished for that. It's going to be seen as an opportunity for growth and learning. People are much more energized and engaged. We see high levels of innovation. So when people feel safe, they're able to think more clearly. They're able to think outside of the box. We see the collective intelligence of the team being tapped into so that people co-create really, wonderful new ideas. And this is where people just are naturally more resilient. And always, I think there's a place for resilience programs in organisations. I think we have to be really mindful that we're not trying to just fix people up in a really bad environment. So to put the responsibility on them to, suck it up and get over it. So we need to be mindful that when people are psychologically safe, they feel resilient, and that's a wonderful thing. So I guess what I'm trying to suggest to people is that through some of the research and the work, and I'll be looking at this in my PhD, is that I think there's a precursor to psychological safety, and it's this concept of social safety. And it's interesting, as I've been using this term, so it's really an individual's perception that they feel socially safe to engage in interpersonal risk-taking. So it's that assessment. As I've been using this term, there seems to be a little bit more appetite for the idea that we're trying to influence social safety, which in turn influences our individual psychological safety. So I think probably another really important thing to understand this in terms of performance and how does social and psychological safety link with performance is this idea of lead versus lag. And I've been really interested in this concept for a long time. It's always perplexed me when I work with organisations where all of their focus is on revenue, it's on business results. And so when they start to see revenue kind of shrinking, their first response is to cut staff and not actually understand that that people actually are the most important asset in your organisation. And so if you think about lead versus lag, when we positively influence social safety, so that can be through team members or leaders, then that in turn improves our felt level of psychological safety. And really, those are the lead indicators that then influence our physical safety. So there's lots of research to show that when there is high levels of psychological safety, there are less safety incidents in workplaces. And we see greater mental health as a result of feeling socially safe. We see well-being, we don't have to run around developing well-being programs because everyone feels safe and feels like they're thriving and flourishing at work. We see obviously people high levels of engagement, innovation, and we also see there's relationships between when your workers feel psychologically safe, then because emotions are contagious and they're spreading positive emotions, that customer experience is much more positive. And, that's important because, customer experience, you want people to buy stuff, which influences your business results. So really, a lot of people are kind of trying to do things from the outside in. And I think we need to be focusing attention and working from the lead indicators, and that you pay attention to those and results will follow. And this is a hard one to help people sometimes understand, but it's a really, it just makes so much sense when you think about it, that obviously we pay people to think, and we're paying people to, do the best they can at work. So we need to make sure that we're supporting them to do that. So what do I think companies should be doing? I think there's three key things that companies should be doing. And the first is measuring psychological safety. Because if we're not measuring it, then how can we determine what levers to kind of pull in terms of positively influencing it. I think we also need to be developing a whole of organisational psychological safety strategy. And one of the things I've noticed is there's been a fair bit of kind of reactionary responses to even board members saying, what are we doing about cultural inclusion and diversity? What are we doing about well-being? And then everyone scurries around trying to develop some sort of strategy without actually making data-driven decisions and thinking about what do we need to do here that's going to positively impact on social and psychological safety. And I think we also need to be building neurocapability of leaders and team members. So that's it. Now that we have so much evidence around how the brain drives behaviour in the workplace, the more people understand that, the more that we can be in charge of our biology and actually lead in different ways that support people to feel safe as opposed to not safe. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the measuring thing, just talk a little bit in more detail about each of these things, but just briefly. One of the things that's been really useful from our perspective when we've been measuring psychological safety and linking it with performance, so through the software platform, is we're now able to locate teams based on psych safety and performance. So if you see these quadrants, psych safety down the bottom and accountability or performance on the other axis. Obviously, high-performing teams are in that northeast quadrant. And they're teams where there's high psych safety and high performance. So in a retail organisation we were working in, we were able to show that sales conversion rates are really influenced by psychological safety. However, what we've also been able to determine is that there are some teams that have high psych safety, but they're not performing. And what that tells us is that there's an accountability issue in those teams. So you start to see these subtle differences in then how you would intervene based on where teams are located. And we've done a lot of these, and we see teams in all of these quadrants, or not all of the time, but quite often we do. On the left, that's where there's high levels of, so the stress quadrant, where there's high levels of psych safety, but people are being really driven by to perform. And we know when teams and when teams are in that quadrant, that we see high levels of burnout, we see high levels of turnover. So people just vote with their feet and they decide to leave. And given that we've got a talent shortage right now, you don't want to see teams up there because you're going to lose people. And obviously down the bottom is where there's really concerning low levels of psychological safety and performance. So people aren't feeling like what they're doing has impact or that there's any meaning associated with that. And so I think what's interesting when we think about building a strategy is we actually need to be thinking about strategy based on where those different teams are located. And it's a different style of intervention. Obviously the people in the high performing, you want to support them to move that to the next stage of being even more high performing. So it's really about how do we get all of our people and all of our team to head northeast? What do we need to be doing to support improvements in psych safety, and what do we need to be doing to keep people focused on performance and what we're trying to achieve and do here together? The building neurocapability, this is, I think it's really important. A lot of leadership programs, have focused on some of the technical aspects, but we really need to be looking at what I think Jeff and I would call the hard skills, not soft skills. These are the skills that are really important to enable people to feel safe. So what do leaders need to be doing day by day to be supporting and positively influencing a psychologically safe or socially safe environment? And this is really important given that 75% of employees say the most stressful part of their job is their boss. And we know that leaders influence psychological safety by as much as 70%. So I think we need to be really thinking about how we're equipping leaders to understand that the brain drives behaviour so that they can basically be in the driver's seat of the brain as opposed to the boot or the passenger seat. Now, what can you do? I think there's also, when we're thinking about how can we support ourselves to cope during really challenging times that we're all finding ourselves in, there's a few things that I think are really important. The first is to look after yourself. Now, with people in lockdown and working from home, you can fall into that trap of sitting at your desk for 12 hours a day, eating lunch at your desk. We know that is really bad for you. I'd be saying, get out, go for a walk, go and get some vitamin D, because we know that people are also showing low levels of vitamin D because people aren't walking down to get their coffee from the local, or going out to get their lunch, or walking out to another building to go to a meeting where you naturally get some sunlight. Make sure you're sleeping. Sleep is so important. And we know that when you're sleeping, that's when your brain regenerates and gets rid of all the icky stuff in your brain. And if you don't sleep, then you're not giving the brain that time to refresh. We need to eat well. We need to get out and be active. And I think the other thing is to think about, what is your mindset as you wake up every morning? Is it a doom and gloom mindset of saying, oh, today's just going to be terrible? Or is it, today I'm going to make the best of things, and I'm really going to focus on some things that bring me joy into my life. The second one, remember to breathe. And it was interesting. I was just on a call earlier on today with I feel a very senior leader in an organisation who just had a very challenging meeting, and it's the first time I'd met her, and I said to her, she walked in, she was late. Well, she came into the Zoom room, she was late, and I said to her, do you need to breathe for a minute? And she looked at me, she smiled, and she said, that's precisely what I want you to be helping my leaders with, because she said, yes, I did need to breathe, and thank you for the opportunity to just take a moment to reset. Like we go from one meeting to the next and we're not remembering that actually breathing, and this links with what Alexis does. It's about being mindful and actually thinking about what can I do in the moment to give my brain a little bit of a break and to dampen down that snap reflex. And Andrew Huberman talks about taking 2 sharp inhales, and 1 exaggerated sigh. And we know that this helps you to calm down in the moment. So, little techniques like that can just make such a big difference to how you're feeling. The third area is around building your neurocapability, and really, as I've said, that starts with understanding what drives behaviour and the key attributes we need to develop. So we know, for example, that there's a correlation between psychological safety and situational humility of leaders. So situational humility is where we appreciate that we don't know everything, that we stay in a curious mindset, and that we ask our team to input into decisions and to ideas and innovation. In teams where we see low levels of psychological safety, you might see leaders acting as experts. So they always talk first, they offer their opinions, and then if people don't feel safe, they're not going to challenge it. So it's really flipping some of that stuff on its head. And there's lots of that stuff, and that's what we focus on in our advanced diploma, is really building people's neurocapability. And then finally, I guess it's really trying to think what you can do, each person on this Zoom call, to proactively influence the social safety of your team or your teammates. And there's really simple things you can do, like showing appreciation, asking people if they need help. If you sense that someone's in overwhelm, reach out and say to them, hey, I can see, I'm guessing you might be feeling a little bit overwhelmed. I'm wondering if you need any help, if there's anything I can do to support you. Check in with people, make sure that they are okay, and spend time at the beginning of a Zoom call doing that, rather than getting straight into business. Why not check in and see how people are feeling? And think about, even how you can give introverts a voice. So we know I'm an extrovert, so I think out loud in draft a lot, and I have to be really mindful that I have team members that are more introvert in nature, and so it's useful for me to even approach them prior to a meeting and say, hey, I'm going to be talking about X, Y, and Z. Have you got any thoughts about that, or do you need to do some thinking about that? Because we know some people like to not Introverts tend to like to think, and then they will share their opinion, whereas extroverts go blah, 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 with the little tiny bits of thinking in between. So I guess I hope there's been some things that have been useful in this and that you've taken away from it. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. So Linda Ray. Also, we have a neurocapability page. We have a ton of free resources on our website in our blog. If you look on webinars, we've got other webinars we've done. We've got an advanced diploma of neuroscience of leadership program starting this month. If that's something that if you want to take a really deep dive and get better at building your neurocapability, it's a fantastic program for that. And it starts with self-awareness, because if you can't put your oxygen mask on for yourself first, there's no way that you're going to be able to build. So we need to be able to self-regulate and self-manage. You know, we need to be doing, we need to be mindful and engaging in mindful activities, you know, every single day. And it takes you right through to the skills and capabilities for positively influencing psych safety and social safety. Feel free, if you want to talk to us about how we measure psychological safety and build strategy as well. So, yeah, I hope that's been useful. I'd love to hear if there's any comments or questions.
Linda, firstly, thank you so much. I think that was very insightful for many of this. I'm going through some of the questions here, and while I pick out a few, I just kind of picked up a point when you were looking at that 4-quadrant graph of psych safety and accountability. And for me, what really stuck out was that it sounded like you were saying that creating psychological safety doesn't necessarily mean creating a comfort zone. And I wonder if maybe how you can elaborate on that for us, the little distinction between keeping accountability and high psych safety, and not just allowing for, you know, a comfort zone of, okay, psych safety doesn't mean we can, you know, wear our PJs to work and say whatever we want whenever we want. And what kind of some of the distinctions there?
Yeah, and I think that's something that in the article by Shane Snow, he has some great suggestions in that area. Yeah, we don't want people to be in the comfort zone, because when they're in the comfort zone, they're actually not achieving what we want them to achieve. And I think in the retail, we did a psych safety assessment with a retail company that had 70 stores. And that was a really good case study, because they get the same training, they have the same product. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we were looking for, what's the relationship between psych safety and sales conversion rates, because obviously, you know, that's important in retail. And we were really surprised to see how many teams were in that bottom right-hand quadrant, the comfort zone. So they were having a great time at work. And so they were getting to work and you know, presumably they were talking about what they did on the weekend or the night before. They were hanging out together. And what that meant was that customers were coming into the store and they weren't being greeted, you know, because they wanted to finish their conversation, because there was a great conversation. Oh yeah, oh my gosh, what happened next? You know, they were having all of these conversations. So they were happy, they were engaged, they loved their leader, but they actually weren't performing because they weren't being doing those things that needed to be done. And the work that we did with that organisation was to actually talk about how do we head northeast? What does every employee need and leader need to focus on to move to that quadrant? And so it was about, you know, you greet customers when they come in the door, no matter if you're in the middle of a conversation, you stop that conversation and you greet people. And what was interesting, in a 91-day period, we saw massive shifts. In fact, there was a 14.8% improvement in sales conversion rates, which was around close to $22 million improvement in revenue. Yeah. So it was really just about, you know, making data-driven decisions about what you then need to do. And I think a lot of those store managers were surprised that their teams were in that bottom quadrant. And they didn't want to be in the bottom quadrant. They wanted to be in the northeast quadrant because, you know, they did have some remuneration and bonuses tied to performance as well. So there was something in it for them as well. Mm.
Fantastic.
But you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to go back to a question a little earlier from Jim, and it's kind of a two-part question, and it's an interesting one. So he's asked, if you feel you have a team member who is in the protective mode, What can you do for them? And then the second part of his question is, how can you encourage someone across to the productive mode? And I think just reflecting on that question and then listening to you speak a little bit more around building your own awareness and your own neuro capability, I was interested to think then, as a leader, if I do have a staff member in the protective mode, maybe what I might have done to cause that. And I'll let you elaborate on that, Linda, but it got me thinking. It's a great question.
It is a great question. And if you think about, it's about starting off being curious. What is it that may be meaning this person is in protective mode as opposed to productive mode, particularly if you know that the rest of the team is in productive mode, but this person you think is in protective mode. There are 5 kind of key areas that can, that are kind of domains of our social experience that our brain makes assessments about in terms of social safety. And the first one is certainty. So do I have clarity about what is expected of me and, you know, what's happening now and into the future? So what you'll find is that if people are in protective mode, there'll be one of these 5 areas that people are maybe experiencing threat in. Autonomy. Do I feel like I have choice and influence? Are people in the team listening to, and am I being asked for my opinions? And do I feel like I'm having influence over decisions that affect me? Relatedness. Do my team members, do I matter? Do people care about me? Do I belong? Do I have connection with my other team members? Are they looking out for me? Equity. So this is about, am I being treated fairly and equitably? Or are other members of the team getting much more exciting pieces of work than I am, which, you know, doesn't feel fair, and I move into protective mode? Or the last one is significance. Do I, and this is about our drive for having positive regard from others. You know, do people see that I add value? Am I being appreciated? So I really think from a leader's perspective, and this is where the building neuro capability bit comes in, is it allows you to then be able to determine and be curious and look at, you know, because I don't think leaders go, oh, I'm going to make sure I'm one of the 75% that is the most stressful part of my employee's day. I think leaders act with generally good intentions and unintentionally generate threat. So it's about being curious and trying to have a conversation about, yeah, I can see that it seems to me there might be some struggle for you here. You know, I'm really curious if we could have a conversation to try and get to the bottom of what might be a challenge for you right now.
Yeah, great. So I guess it's about creating that safe space for them to feel like they can be heard in that instance then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know that had a second part to that question, but I can only pay attention to one thing at a time. So I don't know if
I think you've answered it. I think you've answered it through the process, Linda, and that was how to get them out of that into encourage them across into productive mode. And I think you've covered that with the steps that you went through there. So that was great. Thank you. And now I have a question here from Megan, and perhaps a very timely one, being that we are still in the midst of a pandemic and using Zoom for everything. And she's asked, how has video conferencing maybe compromised some of this psychological safety in the workplace? And I recognize this is still a new issue for us, and maybe we don't have a lot of data. It might just be anecdotal suggestions here, but I wonder if you could maybe talk to that a little bit for us, Linda.
Yeah, there have been some neuroscientists that have been doing some research about emotion contagion in a digital environment, and they've been able to determine that there still is transmission of emotion contagion. So if people come onto a, you know, if everyone's in protective mode, then there's negative emotion contagion can be spread to other members on a Zoom call. So that's reasonably, they don't have a lot of data around that, but it kind of makes sense if you think about it. I think the second thing that we need to be mindful of is that because the brain's a prediction organ, we will always try and predict the reason why people behave in a certain way. So if you're in a meeting and someone suddenly turns off the camera halfway through you sharing your idea, you know, you can make an assumption that, oh, they've turned off the camera and they're pulling faces at you because they think it's a stupid idea. So I actually think one of the things that we haven't done well in this transition to the digital environment is setting up rules of engagement. You know, how are we going to engage in this digital environment that keeps people connected, that we have some, like cameras on, or you explain why your camera's going off. I was one of our team members, I was having a session with her, and all of a sudden she turned her camera off, which was very unusual, but it was because her husband had just walked naked behind her, and she didn't want me to see her naked husband. So I think we need to be mindful of, and also, where do we still have fun? When we're in lockdown, where's the fun? And so, because we can just go from meeting to meeting to meeting, which I think is a really bad idea. I think, we need to never have hour-long meetings, just have 50-minute meetings. So there's always time for a biological break. But our team, we got on Zoom because obviously we all work virtually. And Penny just put up, in Zoom, you can put on a little, I don't know what it is, but we all put on, we just had a laugh. Like we all put on, I was a pirate, and, just to have some fun. Like, yeah, 5 minutes of fun isn't going to really kill your productivity. In fact, we know when you laugh, it releases dopamine, and it actually supports you to be more engaged. So I think we need to not lose sight of some of that stuff, and particularly when a lot of us are oxytocin deprived. That's really challenging. So have a virtual hug with everyone.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Linda. And one thing I guess I kind of was thinking about when you were speaking there as well is this idea of our brains create meaning around things. And sometimes I think that comes back to our own self-awareness and our own ability to question our interpretations versus our observations as well, which you mentioned is covered in part of your diploma course as well. Like understanding a little bit more about your own brain and how that works in that instance is really powerful as well.
Yeah, I think if you go back to where I was talking about social safety and snap judgment, we have to be mindful when say you're starting a new job. Okay, and you've had a really bad experience in your last team. You walk into your new team and someone looks a bit like the person you had a lot of difficulty with on the other team. And there's a whole range of cognitive biases that come into play. And one of them is, one category is memory cognitive bias. So, you tap into that memory and it can actually intrude on you making a correct snap judgment in that moment. So it's really we need to almost be aware of, oh, I wonder if my previous experience is kind of intruding into my, and meaning I'm not making the right assessment in this situation. Jeff, is there anything else?
Well, I might jump in on that one, Linda, because one of the things, having personally done the program and now I work for you, it's I really want to share about one of the great things in the program, and it's a quote that you use all the time, is you become a scientist of your own experience to then become an architect. So when you become aware of self through self-regulation and self-awareness of your emotions, you can then not only observe those situations, you can then have an impact on the people around you because you're aware, giving yourself that time and space. And that comes back to a great quote that gets attributed to Viktor Frankl: between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies your power. So when you're able to, in an emotional situation, stop, and that's the biggest thing, is to stop that immediate reaction, because that's that snap decision. We're instinctively programmed to do that, but through understanding of neuroscience, that the emotional rejection is felt and processed in a similar place in your brain as physical pain. So your reaction might be to carry on exactly the same as if someone had just stabbed you, but in reality, they've just said something that you didn't like. And that's when you become that scientist of your own experiment. People can say the most offensive things to me, and I laugh because I have that time in processing and I won't wear it. And that's because of the program that we take people through. And when we get into study period 3 is when we actually focus on psychological safety. So going back to that analogy about the oxygen mask, you look after yourself first to then care for the children. Well, it's the same thing we're talking about in the program, about how we show people their self-regulation and self-awareness, which then allows you to influence psychological safety in the teams or organization. Because we're in that curve, we need, as early adopters, we need the skill set, the armory, so that we can make that change and produce that change and take it through an organization. And that's where that just giving yourself that armory to be able to make those changes. Because we've all had bad bosses. I mean, we actually, Linda and I spoke about this. This session was not about throwing dirt on bad bosses, because there's so many examples of that, and we want to change that. So we want to give examples of great leaders who are doing that. In the comments there, Atlassian, an Australian software company, leading the world on the structure and design of their business as a human-centric business. There's a Dan Price, look him up on LinkedIn. Dan Price runs a payment company in America called Gravity. He capped his pay as a CEO to make sure everyone got twice minimum wage. Like, there are people out there doing it. That's what we're, as these early adopters of psychological safety, we're trying to change what we know science has proven, particularly about dopamine rewards, but businesses doing something else. Yeah. Sorry, I'll take a breath now. Yeah.
Jeff, you always bring such a real human side to these conversations, and that's why it's so valuable to have you here, because your lived experience in this space. You've come, you've experienced the dark side and you've come to the light side through this process, and that's why it's so valuable to hear from you in that space as well.
Yeah, thanks, Alexis. Appreciate it. Yeah, so we don't keep resharing stories of the bad, because we've all worked for someone. It's more about finding those outliers of the new way of business.
Absolutely. And
so that we can, head forward and head towards what we know. And there are businesses doing that every day now. And I think in this conversation, it was really something we've touched on before, Alexis, you and I have spoken about, and Linda, but there's an old school methodology of command and control, who are blaming the next generation of not conforming. Exactly. But what it really is the next generation's actually pushing back and saying, no, you guys are out of touch with the modern reality. And if you don't change, and the analogy is these people who are coming through, the next generation, will be looking after and making decisions when those people are in aged care. So we can keep saying you must do it our way, but you really need to look at it. The world is changing, and you must change.
Indeed. And to me, we're going to see a psychological safety divide opening up, and we're going to see the companies that actually do this well. They're going to attract the talent, and they're going to be employers of choice. And I was just talking to a large organisation this morning, and they are a government organisation, and they cannot attract talent because the corporate sector is offering more money, and it's not an employer of choice. So if they don't actually focus on this stuff and really position themselves as this is the most amazing place to work, they're never going to fill those positions, and they're going to end up in a world of pain. So I think that that's what companies I guess in the future, I'd love to see psychological safety as part of a board KPI or a CEO's KPI. But I think we will see this this kind of widening of organisations that have typically performed quite well because they've been operating in that stress quadrant. They've been pushing, driving their people, and it's not sustainable. So it'd be interesting to see what happens in years to come.
Yeah, and I think this concept of being an employer of choice is obviously going to need to expand to really take on board some of these constructs, Linda, because, and as Jeff mentioned, some of the younger generations moving into leadership roles now as well. I think it's, for a long time we've heard words like entitlement and things like that being used, but I don't think it's necessarily the case. I think we're just recognizing there's a new, better way to do business. And Shelley's just popped into the chat here. Industrial revolution and capitalism taught managers to put profit before people. And so we need to unlearn what has been historically taught. And I think that really does kind of underlie what we're speaking about here. It's this idea that we've been conditioned in a certain way over quite a period of time now, that business needs to look and feel and operate a certain way. But we're really seeing now this push to be human-centric and human-focused, and psychological safety is imperative essentially in actually allowing us to do that. So that's fantastic insights there. So thank you for that, Shelley. I don't see any new questions necessarily coming through right now. So we might, in that instance, wrap it up. Linda and Jeff, do you have anything that you would love to leave our participants with at this point?
Probably just a final comment of saying thank you for taking time out to join us today. And, you know, I'm really excited because I think you are all precisely the type of people that are interested in this concept and will, make an impact on the world in a positive way. So keep trying, like I know that it's early days with this stuff, but don't be disheartened if you share some of this and then people go, oh no, that's, keep trying hard to make an impact because you all do amazing work.
Absolutely.
And I just wanted to add on that, and we did some research just recently, Google Analytics of the term psychological safety 3 years ago was almost non-existent. And it's been accelerated because of COVID. So if we talk about a wave, and I don't want to use the next wave analogy, but the COVID has accelerated what we have known, and that's that mismatch between what science knows, particularly about reward prediction error. So when we get into reward prediction error, that's when people get to the top and they're not satisfied. They have to keep chasing, but of course they're never satisfied because they don't understand that it's a trick of your mind and it's a dopamine loop you get struck into and caught into, and you're never satisfied. So they don't move to a sense of gratitude. When you move to a sense of gratitude, you're then able to do both. You're not only achieve, and that's where the research in dopamine is higher as you're heading towards your goal. So use it for a really strong, powerful motivator, but making sure that you have gratitude to move towards your actual joy of succeeding. If you don't put gratitude in there, you won't. It drops straight away. Dopamine actually drops off completely when you achieve your reward. So that's why people say, and I'll put my hand up in this forum with the people who are left in here. In my personal story, I walked away from the highest paycheck of my career because it was not worth working somewhere that was no longer psychologically safe. The money is a great driver, but it is not, as a human being, it is not the best motivator. And we know that, and we have the science to prove it.
Great.
So once again, just wanted to share my experience.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much. And I just want to say thank you to Jeff and Linda from Neurocapability for joining me on the Making Leadership Mindful webinar today and teaching all of us some very valuable insights in this space of psychological safety, and also giving us some fantastic resources to go away and tangibly start making change in our businesses. So thank you again, Linda, and thank you, Jeff. For those of you who would like to know more about Linda and Jeff and their business and the diploma and other services that their company offer, it's www.neurocapability.com.au. As Linda mentioned, they are starting their new advanced diploma of neuroscience of leadership at the end of this month. So if that is something that you would like to do, and let's face it, we need more leaders in this space that are striving for these sorts of outcomes in businesses, I would encourage you to get in contact with those guys and get involved in their program. So Linda and Jeff, thank you so much again for being so gracious and so insightful and open with your time. I really appreciate it. It's been a joy learning with you. And I hope that everyone has gained some new insights from this session and can go away and start making some real change in the way you lead and the way we conduct business.